Since 2003, this is the Sports Source, East Tennessee's #1 sports talk show.
Presented by Junk Be Gone, Phoenix Conversions.
With your host, John Pennington. The Sports Source starts now.
Good Sunday morning. Welcome into the Sports Source. Happy to have you joining us today. We got a lot to talk about. We're only 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks, 13 days from Tennessee's season opener. So we're going to talk about where Tennessee is. They had a scrimmage last night. We'll talk about where South Carolina is. We'll compare rosters and COVID numbers, and does one team have an advantage over the other on that front. We'll do bold predictions for the season. That's something that the odds makers would say is a less than 50% chance of happening, that we think, this could happen. Lots of stuff to cover today. Let's get right into it. First segment of our program is brought to you by Junk Be Gone. Old tables, desks, and chairs. Old lights and light fixtures. Old equipment and any other office material that you want to get rid of, turn to Junk Be Gone. I always talk about what they do at my house. They work for businesses all over East Tennessee. They can even do your document shredding for you. A local company for other local companies. That is Junk Be Gone. You can learn more at junkbegone.biz. We appreciate them for being a part of the Sports Source. All right, let's welcome in the panelists for today. We have VFL Will Overstreet right here. Thank you for joining us. Next to him from theathletic.com, we have David Ubben. David, thank you for joining us. And right down there, a longtime member of this show, longtime sports writer, longtime radio, TV personality, Chuck Cavaleris. Chuck, thanks for being back.
Great to be back.
Okay, let's quickly get into Pruitt on Tennessee's preps and where things stand right now. Less than 2 weeks before kickoff, Jeremy Pruitt revealed this week that he has had 48 players, 48 at one time or another, who have been, several of those are right now, who have been out due to COVID and 14-day contact tracing quarantines. So 48 guys who have missed or are missing right now at least 14 days of time. He said that due to the lack of bodies to date, UT will, and I love this quote, definitely probably not hold 25 practices, which is allowed, so probably won't get on all the allowed practices. He said UT is likely to stay in camp mode rather than go into game week mode because his team still needs to focus on fundamentals. That's a big one to watch. Also this week, his team did hold something of a scaled-back scrimmage midweek. This is after they had the Knicks one last weekend. Pruitt said the team was sloppy. There were too many penalties. The offense had too many fumbles. But they did get in a scrimmage last night. The offense looked a little better last night in terms of the word coming out of there. But that's where things stand. My question is, with so many guys out, and Will, I'll start with you, is Tennessee going to be ready for game, ready for action in 2 weeks?
It's hard to say how, especially on the offense, you'd be ready for a game like this in just a couple weeks without the amount of practices. And if you really look at yesterday's games, what you saw is, for the most part, offenses did struggle. You also saw struggles in special teams. A lot of plays either not being made or being made by other groups. And it was stuff that you could definitely tell was lack of practice, lack of continuity between those guys working together. So when you have to see that, you look at it and you go, you hope that in these first couple of games, especially this first game, your defense has got to be there. It's got to be the rock that you're going to lean on, and you're hoping that other team has the same offensive struggles and is not a Clemson or an Oklahoma yesterday, which were the ones that had the really good offenses. And you got to lean on your special teams because that's really going to be a break that people have shown these first couple of games. Some teams are doing it really, really bad, and it's getting them beat.
Defense is going to be ahead of offenses this year, and for that reason, it may not be such a bad thing that you got to skip Oklahoma because their offense did look like one of those that it's just clockwork at this point. David, is Tennessee going to be ready considering all the guys they've had? At one point, they were down to just 30 players on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think all the things we've talked about since all this happened, you're kind of seeing it come to fruition. And generally, I think for Tennessee, good year to have basically your whole offensive line back, same offensive system, and your quarterback. Kind of these big picture things we're talking about. We're seeing it now that, you're going to be okay. You feel a lot better, where you're at now than if you were replacing a quarterback or a new system or all those things. Defensively, last year Tennessee gave up fewer plays, longer than 30 yards than anyone in the country. If you can limit your busts, right, that's a great step to not having a rough opener. I mean, they're not going to feel ready, but I think no one is. And Tennessee, I think when you look at them big picture, they'll probably be, even with these issues, probably a little more ready than most folks will, especially you got a little bit extra time as well. So Nobody's going to feel good, but, you go out there and you win. You do whatever you got to do. I think people will live with whatever that takes to get there.
Chuck, last week we had VFLs on the show, Daniel Hood, Sterling Hinton, Mike Stoll. Daniel Hood said, I think they'll be ready. Mike Stoll said, I don't think they'll be ready. And Sterling was somewhere in the middle, I think. No, scratch that. Sterling had to be, they'll be perfectly ready. Where are you, Chuck? Do you think they'll be ready? Do you think it's going to be a little less than normal?
Well, I think they're going to be as ready as they can be. And a lot
you
still
Cavaliers the first question.
Cavaliers the question. A lot still has to fall in place in the next 10 to 12 days. David talks about the offensive line, but isn't that one of the position groups that's been the hardest hit by this?
Well, they looked good apparently last night, but they had Cade Mays in there. Now, we'll get to that a little bit later. There's no guarantee Cade Mays, he may look good in that scrimmage last night, but he may not be playing in 2 weeks.
And remember when the question was, is the SEC smart to wait until September 26th to start? And we kind of kicked that around. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, just think if they were trying to start this coming Saturday. So, I mean, it's a lot of things just have to fall into place. And is it a disadvantage having to travel? And how do you travel? Notre Dame flew into Chicago and took 7 buses to South Bend to play Notre Dame. They limited it to no more than 26 people per bus. How are you going to get there and back, and how does that affect them?
Well, in the NFL, everybody gets their own room anyway, but in college, it's a couple guys getting a room. Are you doing that this year? I mean, is UT going to have to spend more money on more hotel space because each player gets his own room?
I'm not putting 2 starters together. How about that? That's the way I would start looking at it. I'm not putting 2 starters, and I'm not putting the first and string and the backup guy in that same room either. Like,
You're not going to have 2 quarterbacks in the same room.
Right. I'd be looking at it strategically of I'm putting this guy with this guy because I can live. If they both go down, I've got 2 other guys that can fill this position. But I think you have to look at room booking, bus alignment, all those things have to be taken into place of if this one guy gets sick and we have to quarantine these guys around him, did we make the right decisions in how we place them in seating positions and other such things? So it's a new thought process to a lot of people.
I'd just like to say, too, 2 weeks out of the season, this is an unbelievable conversation that we're having right now. They were talking about hotel arrangements and buses, and it's 100% like the most relevant thing.
Yeah. Truly
a dark year of football.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you'd gone back 3 months ago,
I
would have been thrilled to be talking about that. I would have thought we'd be.
And if you can't practice on the field, you can still study your playbook. You can still know your assignments. How many busted assignments and missed tackles, which you're going to see anyway. Well, but how much more of that are you going to see?
Well, and see, that's my question. Let me ask you this, Will. First game, you're always going to see, as Chuck says, you're always going to see missed tackles. You're of the impression that the team with the better defense right now, especially, has got a leg up.
Yep.
Tennessee limited big plays last year. They need to do it again. All right. You're not going to get 25 practices in. You've had a couple of mini scrimmages, not full size, ready to go scrimmages. How much is that going to hurt tackling? How much tackling do you do preseason, and how much difference does it make when you don't do as much?
Yeah, I mean, you've really got to work on tackling in a lot of ways, and a lot of people talk about shells, that they hadn't been able to do that. What we learned in the pros is, we don't take guys to the ground, ever. I mean, that's the number one rule. If a guy falls down on the ground too much, he gets cut, right? Because that's going to hurt somebody. What you learned is, as you're practicing in shells and stuff, every time you come up to make a tackle, you bend your knees and you 2-hand touch below the waist. If you can get in that mentality, you're still freshmen and those kinds of guys are still not going to be good at it, but your juniors should be getting to a place where they can play without the necessary contact of all the time. But you've got to teach them certain skills like that and practice like that to be able to do that. You are going to see some misses. It's not going to be pretty at times. My feeling is why the defense is going to be better is the offense is going – a 10-play drive for an offense right now of making no big mistakes where I don't give up a sack or something, that's just not going to happen. I just feel like you got a much better chance of the defense. Even with the missed tackles and stuff, you're going to come up with that play that the offense makes a bust on. And so I think right now you're in better shape of that defense, even if they have some missed tackles, is playing better.
Fans hate the term bend but don't break. But I mean, the bottom line, there are a lot of pro teams that are like happy as hell with bend but don't break. It's fine. It means you don't get in the end zone. This is one of those years where bend but don't break. That's not a bad thing.
No.
That's a good thing. Make them run as long a drive as they can because they will screw up. It's a good point. When we come back, We've talked about Tennessee and how many players they've missed. What about South Carolina? Where do they stand on COVID, and does that give them an advantage? Is it a disadvantage? We'll discuss that next on the Sports Source.